Hey, it's Todd Danielli, and today I'm going to be in 3D Studio Max 2024 and 2023 for rendering, and I'm going to talk about unwrapping this panel from a couple tutorials ago. Normally I wouldn't return to the same content, but I had a question from Pascal Creative Design 8790. He wanted to know how I go about unwrapping this, and it's actually quite simple. So I'm going to unwrap this. I'm going to briefly touch on going into SubstancePainter and how I would treat something like this in a quick manner, and maybe show a render in Vray when I'm done. So let's get started. So this is the same asset from that tutorial I mentioned earlier. You can see it. All I did was attach, I think in that tutorial I had detached this element, this little star element, reattached it, collapsed the whole thing, and it's one mesh. No UVs right now. So I have a basic material on here. And what I'm going to do first is go to my stack and add a UVW map. And it may be set differently in yours. What you want to do is set it so that it aligns to the panel the way it is right here. So mine, it happens to be Z. I'm going to say fit. Okay. And now if we add an unwrap modifier above this, which we're going to do right now, we add the unwrap. And if we open the editor, you can see that it's a slightly skewed version of the top-down view, which is what that planar mapping gave us. So now the best thing to do is select all the polygons. And what I want to do now is go into mapping. I'm going to go into normal mapping. I'm going to select box mapping. I'm going to say OK. And now we have, this is proportioned properly, and there's a lot of little floaters here. So if you want it to be readable as this, you can scale this whole thing up and then repack these little pieces by hand or whatever. I'm just going to pack it. I'm not so concerned today with everything being in one cluster. So I'm just going to say pack UVs. I get a dialog. I'm going to say 4096, not that it's going to make a huge difference. And I'm just going to say OK. It's going to take a second. My fans on my PC may kick on for a sec. And when it's done, it'll have this packed, and then we'll just make sure that everything looks proper. So it is taking a second. I have a Ryzen 7950X. Okay, so there we see that now everything is packed. And now if I just turn on texture checker and we go into the viewport, say that fast a few times. If we go into the viewport, you can see that everything is aligned perfectly. So we're getting our numbers and letters top to bottom. Even the side faces here are mapped properly. And I think that's a good result. So what do we take? 2 minutes and we have a good unwrap on that. I'll show you also with the checker pattern. They're relatively evenly spaced. They do offset a bit because these are different pieces, but it is proper. So that's the unwrap. That simply, we have the unwrap. So you can collapse it or keep it intact, whatever you want to do. I'm going to say yes, and just save your file. And then what you're going to do is export an FBX so that you can go into SubstancePainter. With the mesh selected, I'm going to just reset the X form, make sure that it's good. There it is. I'm going to collapse that down. I'm also going to center the pivot. Okay, so that's ready to export. Export selected. I'm going to put on my desktop today. Sci-Fi floor to painter. That's my old version. I'm going to just call this V2 or 2. Okay. And export that out. And pretty much I have some options set, but I think they're pretty standard. I have embed media, turbo smooth, preserve edge orientation, say OK. And that quickly it's out and ready to be painted. The mesh is now in SubstancePainter, and what we're going to do is go into a couple of settings here. I want to do this at I'm going to do it at 4K just because I have a good video card and I want to see the texture when I'm doing this. And then we're going to bake mesh maps, and we have some settings here that we can change. So I'm not worried about thickness or position. I do want curvature, ambient occlusion. I'm not worried about ID today. And I'm not worried about the world space normal. So I'm going to just keep these few here checked. I'm going to put this at 2048. You can go higher or lower if you want to. That's the size of the maps that'll be generated for those effects. And I'm just going to hit bake selected textures. It'll run through the process, and when it's done, I can go back to painting. Okay, so now the mesh is ready. I'm going to just delete the base layer. And what we're going to do is add some sort of, I don't know, some sort of texture and material to this. And what I had looked for was industrial flooring. I really wanted it to be metal because it feels like metal panels, but I am going to do some metal, but I'm going to make it look a little different. So this reference here is just some rusted or metal panels that are just made into tiles. And I like kind of what's going on this one right here. So I'm going to try to do something along that line. And then the other interesting detail is sometimes those floors, like industrial floors, are painted with paint, and you can see a lot of the sheen has a lot of distress and a lot of stippling and dimples from the paint, like I guess the roller or the texture of the floor. We're going to do that as well. Thing is, actually I want to do is let's go for leather. Artificial leather. I'm going to pull that in right here. And what that does is it makes this cool little textural surface similar to this reference. So I'm going to keep that just for some small detail on the floor that we can later change, okay? With that leather it's applied, you can see I can turn the light and really catch some of the detail. And that's important for as you're painting the texture, you want to get a good look at it. So just keep that in mind, you can do that. That's a shift and right click on the mouse and that'll give you what you need. And then we're going to come in here above this leather, we're going to go with like a steel rough, I think. So I'm going to look for steel rough. I'm going to drag it above. Okay. And there we have it. And now for me, it needs a little work. So I'm just going to play around with the scaling or the tiling of it. The base color, I might want a little bit darker. And for sure, the roughness, I'm not really pleased with right now. I'm going to make it rougher. So that doesn't look too bad. You can see if I move this around, it's got a little difference in the sheen, like there's difference in the glossiness levels. So let's just start with that as the base. Okay, so now we have some metal, some roughness, and then we're going to just duplicate this steel rough. I'm going to bring down the normal on that because it's amplifying as I stack it up. I'm going to just zero that one out and go to the original one and maybe lower it as well. Just a little too much for my taste. And then on this version, I'm going to change the roughness. I'm going to add a black mask. That's the way that we control what we're doing. And then we're going to blend it using a map. So I'm going to just say, add a fill in the grayscale. I'm going to look for a map. And I kind of like, there's a certain one I want to use in here. I think this one. Okay, and I'm going to turn it up so you can see it's actually going the wrong direction. So we're going to rotate it 90 degrees. Now it's going the proper direction, and we're going to just increase the contrast just so I can see what's going on. And you can see, let's toggle that layer on and off. So I think the roughness of this material probably needs to be a little higher even. I'm going to stick with that. Okay, so now we have two kinds of metals being mixed together. We have that surface from the leather, and it's starting to develop. So the next thing we want to do is, for me, I think we could add some dirt and maybe some detail around the edges. So first thing was we'll add a fill layer, call it dirt. I'm just going to go to the color. You could turn on and off whatever you want to use. I'm going to do the color as a really like almost blackish color. I'm going to turn the roughness up quite a bit. I'm actually going to push the metallic up. And then what I want to do is go into these masks, these generator masks, and I'm going to just look for something that'll work well. And I think, let's just try gun edges. Let's see. Let's see what gun edges does to that. It does do something, and we're going to just play with the values in here, see what we got out of that. So the global balance, if I make it bigger, that's a little more evident. But I think I want to invert that. And the last thing I want to do is it's way too strong. So I'm going to first of all drop the contrast on that. And then I think in general I want to go to the roughness. Pull that down quite a bit. And leave that as is. So now we have the two kinds of metal. We have some dirt going over the top. Next thing we're going to do is add a new layer, but we're going to do it from the materials again. And I'm just going to use aluminum, and that's a pretty bright aluminum. So first thing I want to do is change the diffuse color. Maybe bring it up a little in roughness so it's not so brassy. And now what I want to do with that is maybe same thing. I want to maybe grab edge scratches. Let's see what that does. If we move in, we can see it. And I want to just adjust the size and what's going on with it, the wear level. So there's the wear level, the contrast, grunge amount. You can play with all these values to get what you like, but you see it added, if I turn it on and off, it adds like that the panels where they're close, it's a little more worn or it's a little cleaner, whatever the case, but that's kind of an interesting effect. So next thing you would do is it looks cool, looks kind of metally and dirty and whatever. I think the next thing I would do is add a nice like paint above that, just to like give some kind of markings like we had in this example. So let's just do, let's see, plastics. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to go with this plastic. I'm going to just grab it, drag it on top. I'm going to make it like a caution color, like you would see like on a train platform or something. And maybe just roughen it a little bit because it's a little too strong for my taste. And there we go. Now I'm going to add a black mask. And to that I'm going to add a paint. Well, you don't need to add a paint, but let's not add a paint. Let's just go in and start to paint on the mask. So right now, let me grab my pen. If I come in and get a brush, remove plastic from the search window. I have basic hard. I'm going to shrink the size of it down to maybe this. And what I want to do is I'm going to click off the mesh. I'm going to hold down Shift and click again. Not perfect, but you get the idea. Move this a little bit. And do it a third time. I'm going to drag that below the dirt. Okay, and maybe the dirt, I'm going to just go to the base color and reduce it a little bit, like that. And now we have this going on. Although I want this aluminum pure to be below that. Now I'm just making adjustments because that looked too shiny, like metallic. And then I want to go back to plastic, make sure it's looking good. Okay. And there we have like a little basic floor graphic. And we can do a bunch of this. I'll do one more quick one. So back on the mask. Okay, and the other thing you can do is if you go to the textures, there's some things in here that might suit what you're doing. So I'm going to look through here and see if there's anything I really like. Let's just go with, I don't know, this. Okay, and now if I make my brush bigger and I zoom out a little bit, maybe I want that to live like right next or right in front of this, so I can just click and get a graphic on the floor. Now you see the dirt? I might want the dirt below that. Yeah, and then this maybe I can just like lessen the base color just a touch so it feels a little worn. I like that better. Okay, so there we added a graphic. You can add graphics with all these little stencil kind of mask things. I'll do a couple more. Let's do this one, and grow my brush size and put that here. Okay, just examples, and you can make more colored decal things and put them all over the place. It's up to you. Now, last thing I think, the thing you have to remember with Substance Painter is you have the ability to really just add a lot of detail, and also keep in mind that these, like this texture from the leather, you can reduce that and change that till you get what you like as far as output. Okay, I'm going to add a fill layer, and I'm going to turn off everything except for height. And then in the height, I'm going to pull that in, and I'm going to just make the tiling So that's the max tiling, but when you run out of space in the slider, you can go further. I'm going to do 128 and see what I get out of that. And then I'm also going to adjust the balance a bit and get like a hexagon floor tile like that. And I think I want to even go higher than 128, so I'll go, I don't know, 164 maybe. Yeah, okay. And then lastly, I want to just drop the height value. So I'm going to go to height and pull this down. It's a little too strong for my taste. Made something like that, okay? And now we're going to add a black mask. And we have a couple options now. We can go here and use, let's see, polygon fill. And we have options here for like different options as far as polygons, UV islands, mesh, whatever. I'm going to use UV chunk fill and just click on some of these pieces, okay? Like this one and this one. I'm randomly doing it. I don't want to do the little ones. I want to do the big one because that's where you need your feet to catch. Maybe that one and this one. And then if I come out, you can see we added that detail, and it just breaks it up and makes it interesting. And that's the important factor. You can go as far as you like with this. I'm going to stop here and show you something in Vray. Now I'm in 3D Studio Max 2023. Just because my Vray is Vray 5, I have not upgraded to 6 yet, and right now I just can't see putting up the cache for that. So 2023 I have Vray 5 installed. It doesn't seem it's available for 2024 on the Chaos website yet. So anyway, so what I did is, this is a different version that I had done earlier of the same panel with some textures on it. I threw in a few lights. I ported my maps into Vray, set them up. That'll be another tutorial. That may be something that I would put on Gumroad. I set this off to render, and here's the result. You can see it's pretty good looking for like 15 minutes of work we just did on this piece. Vray render, as I said, the maps and stuff were integrated. That might be something I would show maybe on Gumroad. Anyway, I think this shows how you unwrap. Use SubstancePainter to texture. Shows basically what the render would look like in Vray, and I think it was a quick tutorial and pretty informative. So I hope that helps everybody. And again, if you like what you saw, please like and subscribe below. And until the next tutorial, I'm Todd Daniele. Thanks.